Josh Frydenberg, welcome to the program.
Nice to be with you, Richard.
Now, you've had a pretty interesting week. I note that you're down in South Australia to make an announcement, and I watched, actually, and I replayed it, the fact that the Premier of South Australia basically gate crashed your party.
Well, it was an important announcement we were making in South Australia, a world first, a virtual power plant linking 1,000 households and businesses with solar panels and batteries, and then providing extra electricity into the grid. And the Commonwealth had partnered with AGL in this $20 million project, and the state was not providing any money, but suddenly Jay Weatherall decided to turn up and use it as a soapbox to attack the federal government, given that he's pretty used to attacking everyone else, whether it's the Australian energy market operator or anyone else.
They continue to attack the Australian electricity market and the body that controls it, and yet it's only some months ago where Koutsounatis, their treasurer, jumping up saying how wonderful it all was. I mean, what happens down there?
Exactly right. Jay Weatherall's argument is he wants to go it alone, even though he went it alone in the first place, and that created the problem. And Koutsounatis, the energy minister, had said in the state parliament after the blackout last September that they had been well served by the national electricity market. So you really don't know if they're Arthur or they're Martha.
He went further than that, because I had a look at the Hansard. He's actually talking about how they've had all this input from these experts locally in South Australia. Exactly. It's basically almost like it's their body.
Exactly right. They were boasting that they had designed the market. But I think there's only one word to describe Jay Weatherall's behaviour yesterday, and it's a word that Paul Keating famously used, namely recalcitrant, because really his behaviour was uncalled for, was unedifying. It was not becoming of a senior political figure in this country, and it was all petty politics rather than talking about the positive announcement that the Commonwealth and a leading company, AGL, were making. He was belittling that announcement and belittling the Prime Minister's announcement about the Snowy Hydro scheme as well.
Well, I think I'll get to that, because I think that's a really important one. But back in South Australia, I just want to cover this whole battery argument first. It seems to me that the $500 million that the state of South Australia, which is technically broke anyway, is going to spend on this is just an enormous amount of money, and you can't really say to yourself that there's going to be much coming out of it. I mean, it's not as if that battery farm will in any way, shape or form provide base power. All it can do is fill in on the worst of occasions, but it doesn't do much filling in, does it?
Well, this was a $550 million admission of failure by Jay Weatherall, no doubt about that. He had been saying for months that there wasn't any problems in South Australia, it was all hunky-dory. In fact, the only issues were related to the weather or a privatisation that took place more than a decade ago, or the Australian energy market operator, or the fact that there wasn't a price on carbon. It was everyone's fault except his own, but now he's had to spend more than $500 million, and you're right, it won't solve all of South Australia's problems. The real issue that Jay Weatherall has to deal with is the fact that he has the most unstable electricity system in the country, and he has the most expensive electricity in the country. So he's got to answer to the fisherman in Port Lincoln, or to the pensioner in Mount Barker, or to the small businessman in Port Adelaide. Why do they have in South Australia the most expensive electricity in the country? And the reason is because Jay Weatherall is conducting a big experiment. They're his words, a big experiment with more than 40% of their power coming from wind and solar without the necessary backup and preparation.
Well, that really means wind, because solar is only 2% and 38%, as I understand it, of that 40 is wind power. But the problem seems to me to be that they're now going to, I think, build a gas-fired power station, which they'll only turn on when things are crook. I mean, how do we maintain supply in the southern states if the big station in power station in Victoria is closing, and I think it's next week or the week after. So it's almost upon us, that closure, and that's 20% of Victoria's power. So that 20% has got to be made up by other states who are already making up Tasmania's needs. I mean, how does it all work, and do we have enough power?
Well, the best advice to us from the Australian energy market operator is that the system will cope with the closure of Hazelwood, which is 22% of Victoria's supply and about 5% of the supply across the national electricity market. It will be made up in part by the excess generation of black coal-fired power from New South Wales. So Victoria will go from being a net energy exporter of power to become a net energy importer at times of peak demand, and also by increased gas supply. Now, one of the issues we have in Australia is the moratoriums that have been placed on the development of unconventional and indeed conventional gas in Victoria's case, and we need to have those moratoriums lifted. The Prime Minister had some very strong words to the LNG suppliers when he met with them earlier this week, and he said to them he was looking for a commitment, which he got from them, to make sure that there were no shortfalls when it came to gas supply on the east coast of Australia. That's an important commitment, so we won't see a repeat of what we saw in South Australia a few weeks ago when one of the gas-fired power stations, Pelican Point, said that they didn't have the gas contracts in place in order to get running at a time when their supply was important to South Australia. So it's an important commitment that the Prime Minister has got from those LNG suppliers, and now we look forward to the implementation of it.
Now, I think it is an important commitment, but I still, just as a mug punter, I still can't see how we get through the next 10 to 20 years without some more coal-fired power stations.
Well, as you know, Richo, the Prime Minister's made clear we're going to be technology neutral when it comes to the supply of power. It's all of the above. Right now we get more than 60% of Australia's power from coal-fired generation, and we see coal continuing to play a critical role in the future. Now, there are these high-efficiency, low-emission coal-fired power plants that you see right throughout Asia that could have a role to play here in Australia. You also see carbon capture and storage, which is a critical component reducing emissions when it's connected to coal-fired power stations. We see a big role for gas, and we also see an important role for renewables. And the announcement by the Prime Minister about the Snowy Hydro scheme just yesterday was very significant.
Yeah, no, hang on, I'll get to that.
Potential.
I'll get to that, but I want to follow through on this coal-fired one, because it seems to me that everyone is now so scared of coal, scared of the reaction of all those people who are so opposed to using coal at all, that you've got the banks in retreat. It's hard to imagine any bank, any one of our big four, banking any new power station unless and until there's some lead from the government that tells the bank it's okay. And that may involve money from the Commonwealth, it may involve some form of guarantee or partial guarantee. How far is the Commonwealth prepared to go along that path?
Well, look, we've said that coal-fired power station does play and will continue to play a critical role, and that these Healy plants are very interesting indeed, and that we would be interested in hearing from any key partners who would like to establish one of these coal-fired power stations in Australia. Now, of course, you would need the sufficient approvals, you need the cooperation of a state government, and you would need partners from industry who are prepared to finance it. Now, my parliamentary colleague Matt Canavan has talked about the Northern Australia Infrastructure Facility. As you know, right now the Clean Energy Finance Corporation cannot, due to the mandate that it has, invest in these various plants, but there's certainly good evidence throughout the world that these coal-fired power stations do work in reducing emissions and do provide important baseload power in countries such as Japan, India and China.
Well, I can't see for the life of me why we aren't building some now. It seems to me that both the governments of Queensland and New South Wales are well disposed towards coal-fired power stations. Surely the Commonwealth can get together with them And I mean, why can't we build one at Townsville and another one in the Hunter? It doesn't seem to me to be all that difficult.
Well, in fact, in Queensland, it was Wayne Swan, when he was the Treasurer, who commissioned a report into a new coal-fired power station in that state. But unfortunately, the Labor Party, as you know, has been hijacked by the ideology of the Greens in order to win votes from the Greens in the city. They've sacrificed blue-collar jobs in the regions, and for them, coal has become a dirty word, even though it still supplies 60% of our electricity.
Exactly. I mean, it's a dirty word, but they still want to turn the lights on at night, those very same people. All right, we shall now move on to this question of hydro. Now, how much does the Snowy Mountain scheme, how much of the Australian grid does it provide?
It provides more than 4,000 megawatts, which is a very substantial amount of energy indeed. And the proposal that we're talking about is a 50% boost on that with an additional 2,000 megawatts. So to put it in perspective, Hazelwood produces about 1,600 megawatts of power. So it's even bigger, this increase, than what you get currently from Hazelwood. Now, there hasn't been any major upgrades to the Snowy Hydro scheme since the 1970s. It's an iconic structure in Australia. 100,000 people built it over the 25 years from 1949 to 1974, and it is very important in providing clean baseload power into the states of New South Wales and Victoria.
How will it actually work, Josh?
What
do you actually do to increase it by 50%? How do you make that work?
Well, it would be a pumped hydro facility, so no new dams, and there's already two reservoirs, the Tangaranga Dam and the Tallumbingo Reservoir, and there's about a 680 metre height differential between those two reservoirs. So what you would do is you'd send the water down and through a turbine create power that way, and then pump it up when the electricity was cheap, for example, late at night or early in the morning, and then that way you would be generating more power when you need it and using the power to pump it up, the water up the hill when it's cheap and available. So it's about 27 kilometres of new tunnels and pipes. It will be a sophisticated project. It would employ more than 500 people. The cost will be around $2 billion. The Prime Minister had a very constructive conversation with the New South Wales Premier, Gladys Berejiklian. I had a constructive conversation with the Victorian Treasurer, Tim Pallas, and given that the three parties, the Commonwealth, the New South Wales and the Victorian governments are the stakeholders, obviously we would hope after the feasibility study proved this up by the end of this year that there could be a green light to go ahead.
Yeah, well, let's hope so, because it's obviously something we need. In fact, today I shook hands with the Prime Minister, which is a bit of a surprise to both of us, I think. I saw him at the Bill Leak Memorial, at which I might say he spoke very impressively. But let's face it, I don't understand, and I'm sure you would have read what I wrote yesterday, why you as a party, you and all of yours, are not out there really taking up the cudgels and really taking on this argument on penalty rates. If you are the party of small business who desperately want this change, why aren't you just simply out there, all of you, out there campaigning on it?
Well, we've made our position consistently clear. Namely, this was a decision of the independent umpire, a position and a decision and a power that Bill Shorten had supported when he was the Minister for Industrial Relations, and you know, we will abide by that decision. Unfortunately, the Labor Party wants to play petty politics and thinking that there's political mileage out of it, they want to walk back from their decision.
You can't sell that to me. Here is the situation. Forget what the Labor Party is doing. The question is, what are you doing? Why is it that the party of small business isn't fighting for small business?
Well, we are.
You're not.
We are every day. We are every day. We've got tax cuts for small business. We're cutting red tape for small business. We understand there are more than 2 million small businesses across the Australian economy, Richo, with it, which are the engine room of the nation.
That's all laudable stuff, mate, but it's not the same as penalty rates. It's the big deal for small business, and you've been very reluctant to take a stand.
hang on, Richo. We're not the ones who are we're not the ones who are proposing to wind back the decision, the Fair Work Commission. That's the Labor Party. So we're actually abiding by that decision.
Yes, but you're not fighting for
its
it.
impact.
I agree you're abiding for it. You're saying, oh, the umpire said this is what we're going to do, so we're not going to upset the umpire. What I think small business expects of the Liberal Party is that you are their champion. You're supposed to be out there selling this, convincing people that it's the right way to go. The government is simply not doing that.
But the decision stands. The Labor Party,
I know it stands,
they can huff and puff all they like, and we're not going to change our position.
No, yeah,
so
exactly.
the position stands, and the penalty rate cuts will flow to business.
Well, all I can say is
creating jobs.
If you think it's that easy, I wish you well. You're going to need a lot of luck, though, because I don't think it's going to be that easy. I think there's an awful lot of people who will vote the other way because of it, and I think it needs a sustained selling if you're going to get anywhere with it. But the Liberal Party seems incredibly reluctant to so do. Anyway, I've gone way over time, and we will have to leave it there, but it's always a pleasure to talk to you, Josh. Thank you very much.
Great to be with you, Richo, and all the best for the weekend and to your viewers.